Welcome to VUC 2019, Visions Under Construction. Our guest today is Diana. Anyway, welcome back.
Why? Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you for having me again.
Whoops.
Oh, and I'm really sorry for my camera. I keep falling apart.
You keep fainting. I know it's from joy from seeing us all, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what's happening.
We're going to talk about a bunch of different things, but the first thing I think we should talk about while it's fresh in your memory is the VUC in Amsterdam. Tell us a little about that, your impressions.
So I'm actually in Amsterdam for Mobile Virtual Network Operators Congress, which happens like twice a year. It's quite of a small event, maybe 500 people, but it's very targeted to mobile virtual network operators and to mobile network operators. It's basically a congress where mobile operators, both virtual and MNOs, traditionals, they get together to try to exchange informations and to get new solutions to start like new services. For example, there are people from mobile money businesses like Credit Pro, I believe it was their name. There are people that are selling core network equipment for MVNOs and MNOs like us. There are also companies that are solving all kinds of other problems that MVNOs have, like, for example, APN provisioning of the APN for the phone without the need from the user, using an SMS provisioning, like the guys from House. There are also a lot of MVNOs, like there is a lot of IoT going on, Internet of Things. There is also, I even encountered a company that was actually doing gaming as a value-add service for MNOs and MVNOs. So you get a fairly large diversity of vendors, and when it comes down to the mobile operators themselves, oh, and I forgot to mention, you also get a lot of companies that are like roaming hubs that are sitting between different mobile operators, like MVNOs and MNOs. Like, for example, I saw Bix, which is probably one of the largest in the world. There are actually a branch of the Belgacom. There was also a booth of Cineverse, which Cineverse is like the second largest in the world, the other large in the world, in this world. They also had a booth. There was Tata Communication, which is also a roaming hub, and there also an exchanger of minutes between these operators, there were all kind of, like I said, all kind of mobile operators, like I've mentioned earlier, the IoT operators, or machine to machine, basically operators that are very specifically specialized in the market of Internet of Things devices, that are like parcel tracking or fleet tracking, or all kind of vertical markets.
So that begs the question, Diana, that begs the question of whether there was much talk of 5G, because IoT, 5G.
There wasn't any conversation about 5G that I've been to.
No.
Because everyone knows that, because the story of the 5G is that it's going to be relevant for these players probably in about 6 years. So the thing with the 5G is that 5G was not released yet. We are hoping that the standards are going to be actually released in December this year. So there is no 5G for all the practical purposes right now. It's just very much a buzz. It's not really something that is deployable right now.
Right. It's funny because there's already at least one operator in the United States claiming that they do 5G, and there is one 5G phone. Yeah, James, I want to get you in on this too. But what's funny is James and I were in Berlin, and there was a whole. There was at least one major. I'm not talking about you, James, but the doctor presented a whole 5G thing, as he has been doing for a couple of years, by the way. But
Let's point out though that U.S. claim about having 5G deployed is at this point bullshit.
That isn't even 4G plus, right? I mean, it's just,
Well, really, the thing is 5G in general actually means how much speed the phone is supposed to get. So in US, for all the practical purposes, they're reaching the speed, so it's a 5G technology. However, that doesn't mean it's compatible with what is called the 5G NR, which is the actual standard. So you have the 5G as like 4G, it's the same type of a naming. And then you have for a 4G, the technology was actually called LTE. And if you remember back in the day, there were two competing technologies for 4G. One was LTE and one was WiMAX.
Yep.
And they were both called themselves 4G, right? And now on 5G, you have the 5G, the generation, and then you have 5G NR, which is the standards, which were not released yet. And then there are the 5G non-standard technologies, like the one that Verizon is using in US. So yes, it is a 5G technology. It's not a compatible 5G technology, if it makes any sense.
Here's a quick, I just did a quick Google to see what, they've got their video. List of 5Gs, and the first thing that they're talking about is Apple. But the point isn't 5G is a different frequency.
No, it's not about frequencies, Randy. It's about what happens in the back end.
Right.
There's a bit of radio in there, but it's mainly the back end piece. So my definition of 5G is 3GPP release 15 and 16. 15 is out now as of or the latest version, 26th of April this year. And release 16 is not. So in my book, unless it's 3GPP release 15, it's not 5G.
Look at this, Huawei phones, which won't be on sale in the United States, right? 5G.
There is no such thing as 5G because they didn't even define how to authenticate the damn phone. Okay, It's actually 5G on data, but the control path is on 4G. So you actually need a mixed network 5G, 4G. Seriously, this is an endless conversation.
Yeah.
Because until in a year from now, the networks are gonna be up and running with the standards being already existing, and everything is gonna be fine. So yes, right now, whoever is pretending to have 5G, it's full of shit, except for Verizon. But it's good for the industry overall. So why bother to talk about it?
Indeed, I agree entirely with Diana for once. We need to focus firmly on getting 4G rolled out, and 4G for 98% of the population is easily good enough today.
I was waiting
I think.
for a quick response.
Oh yeah, I was waiting for Diana to come back and throw something.
Here she is.
But
No, I think 5G will represent more speed, and it's a good thing. However,
well, the three things that 5G gives us is, firstly, that massive bandwidth when you need it, but it also gives us ultra low latency for real-time stuff like cars and flying drones and playing musical instruments.
So,
and that's
James,
exactly why I asked the question, Diana, because if you say there was a lot of IoT, I would have thought that they would be talking about 5G, even though it doesn't exist.
Why?
Because that's what it's for, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
No.
the third bit is that ultra low power stuff. So it's all about playing with.
It has nothing to do with anything. There is no relation between those things. So let's just start with them one by one. You said ultra low latency.
Yes.
So when you say ultra low latency, how many milliseconds are we talking about?
We're talking about of the order of 5 milliseconds or below.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Why just name one application where you're gonna need, so it's 5 milliseconds between what and what?
Well, that's not really defined, but we can give examples. One would be any kind of vehicle, either terrestrial or aerial.
Between what and what? I mean, if you say 5 milliseconds delay, you have to define between something and something.
A good point, because if it's 5 mils between you and the tower, are there towers still? Yes.
Well, a better scenario would be something like a motor vehicle, an automobile, and a traffic light.
Is it a direct connection, though, in that case?
It would be, yes.
And is that part of 5G or not?
So you will need 5 milliseconds between the car and the stoplight.
Well, not in France, because
Well, even better than that, possibly.
So, okay, 5 milliseconds between the car and the light for which action to really happen? Well, what do you expect the outcome to
it
be?
doesn't matter. The point is that the status needs to be transmitted quickly.
Actually, it does matter. Just bear with me till the end.
Okay, I'll bear with you.
Well, perhaps a better scenario is car to car, where one car does something and then the car behind it has to react to that.
I absolutely agree with you, James. I absolutely agree that you should actually have a very small latency between those two. So let's calculate how much 5 milliseconds means in terms of distance. And how much 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds means in terms of distance. Let's assume that the cars are actually driving with some crazy speed, like 200 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, as they do in Bucharest.
Yeah, so let's say they're rolling around for 200 kilometers an hour. The 200 kilometers an hour between, it means, let me figure out how many meters a second.
The math is easy if you make it 150 kilometers or even 300, because then
let's do it 150 because that's more
realistic.
So how many meters will that be on a second?
100 kilometers per hour is equal to 91 feet per second. So you could just say...
Don't put it into feet. Keep everything in meters.
I know, but that's what they're saying here. But the point is that...
That's like 30 meters, right?
Well, let's see.
So it's 150
30 meters
times 3600, which is the number of seconds in times 0.05. Is that right? No, divided by. Yeah, try and work this out.
10 meters per second is equal to 36 meters per hour.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Is it 10 meters a second or is it 20?
10 meters per second is 36 kilometers per hour. That's like a city driving speed. So 10 meters per second, right?
I'll tell you what.
Well, think about
that's like 60 meters a second. If they're rolling around with 200 kilometers an hour, right? About there.
Okay, let's. Okay, Google. How many meters does a car traveling at 150 kilometers per hour travel in 1 second?
Yeah, it's going to know that.
My apologies. I don't understand.
Oh.
Yeah, no shit.
So, okay, can we all agree that it's about 60 meters?
No, that's too much. What, for 1 second?
Yes.
10 meters per second is your average city driving speed of 36 kilometers an hour.
Okay.
Multiply with 6, that's 60 meters. That's good enough.
60 meters. So 1/20th of that would be 3 meters.
Yeah. So let's assume that it's gonna be a 200 milliseconds. That's just a fifth of it. That's 12 meters, right?
Hmm.
So which kind of a brake does the car in front of you needs to actually touch, so that the car behind needs to actually react with less than 200 milliseconds?
Well, 12 meters with normal driving distances in Bucharest, you would be up the back end of the car in front. You would have a crash.
Yeah, but this is sort of a non-issue because you're not going to have cars doing real-time remote telemetry like that. That sort of telemetry has to be done locally to the vehicle.
Absolutely. This is why they're called autonomous cars. And this is why ultra low latency is just bullshit.
Right, and that's why, you know, the remote connection is going to be for a collection of logging data and such like that. It's not going to be for real-time interaction of the vehicle with, except potentially if there's going to be any wireless interaction with neighboring vehicles as they're proximate. But other than that, they need to be autonomous.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's take another scenario, the cooperative music scenario. How many milliseconds can you stand before you go out of sync when you're playing together as a band?
It would be good to have 20 or 10 or 20 would be good. 10 or 20 milliseconds.
Okay. So any more than that?
The less you can get, the least you can get on the really high-speed connections is probably about 30. You know, it's limited by the speed of light, though, so you can't fake that.
So I have a question. How many people are actually really doing collaborative music playing?
A lot, but it's
well, Randy does it all the time.
Well, I don't do it all the time, but I tried it, and there are a lot of people who are interested in it. But they're interested in it. They do stuff that doesn't have any beat, that doesn't have time, because you can't with 35 or 40. You're generally getting between 50 and 100 milliseconds, and you can't play music with that kind of a lag.
So again, here's the question.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of people doing it though, and a lot of people would do it, Diana, but I mean, this isn't a reason to develop 5G. But if 5G was able to do 10 even, that would be brilliant, because your computer is going to do 3 or 4 already, the hardware.
But here's the story, Randy. This is why my first question was, okay, 5 milliseconds between what and what? You're already connected over fiber. 5G is not going to get any better than the fiber. It can get better than 4G, but it cannot get any better than a wire. So if you get like 50 milliseconds, you're not going to get anything better than that.
Well, I haven't specifically have not tried with fiber, but it's true that if I ping anything, I'll have to find somebody who has fiber. And even if we were in the same city, frankly, I don't think you're going to get a very, very low. I don't think you get below 30. And here's why: you have the two hardware interfaces are already going to give you probably 10 milliseconds right there. So then it's the distance, the speed of light distance. We've already figured this out.
Okay. Well, it has to be said that signals propagate faster with radio than they do down fiber. You know that, don't you?
Do they?
I have a question for Diana, actually, and also for James, but it's more sort of generalized, and that is, I have heard it said that all wireless networks are in the end wired networks. That is, all wireless networks are backed by some kind of wired backhaul. Is that true, and does that continue to be true as we go into a 5G world?
Great question.
I think generally there's an element of truth in that. However, there's a sudden resurgence in people putting in radio links for ultra low latency communications. So there are now radio relay chains that go across Europe specifically for high frequency trading. So if you can shave a couple of milliseconds off your round trip time, you can make millions, billions with high frequency trading. So for what it's worth, well, probably a few billion, isn't it?
Setting aside the fact that that's evil, let's consider,
is it evil?
Are we still going to have wired backhauls, or are we going to have entirely wireless backhaul in
No,
the coming world.
I think we're always going to see a lot of fiber around the place for the immediate future because it is robust and relatively cheap and high bandwidth. For all of those really good reasons, you're just going to see lots of it.
And because it's not sort of impacted by spectrum, which remains somewhat limited resource.
Yes, yeah, indeed. It's very difficult to interfere with fiber optic cables.
Diana, what's your take, Diana?
I totally disagree with James.
What, you agree or disagree?
I totally disagree with you, James, on that one.
Thank goodness for that. I thought you were getting soft. Go on,
No.
explain why. Explain why you think...
Diana, your camera's sliding back down. You need to move it up just a little bit, please. Because your forehead is cut off. There you go. Thank you. Good. Explain why you disagree with James.
First of all, when you are using a radio backhaul, you do not need radio spectrum because the radio backhaul is usually a point-to-point. And the newer radios are actually using electronic beamforming to actually find each other. And there are directional antennas, so you do not need radio spectrum. So it doesn't make any sense.
I disagree with that because you've got to have some spectrum to have your beamforming bit on, even if it is license-free, so 60 gigahertz or whatever spectrum. You still have to have spectrum, and it is a finite resource. You can only
Why is it a finite resource? You have two antennas that are directed to each other. The spectrum you only need it if you have an omni coverage, like you have for the front haul. For the back haul, you use directional antennas.
Between 2 points A and B, you can only use one set of frequencies once. Well, you probably get away with twice actually, because you can do opposite polarizations. But yeah, you can only use it effectively twice, and there will always be a finite amount of bandwidth you can get through on that. Whereas with a fiber solution, you can just put in multiple fibers, and you can get a much higher throughput.
So yeah, I very strongly recommend that you will take a look into the millimeter wave beamforming, because you're absolutely right. But when it comes down to...
Yes, I'm just looking around here. I've got some 60 gigahertz active beamforming equipments here, and they're very, very good. So the ones I've got deliver a 1 gigabit per second link.
How many gigahertz do they actually cover in terms of bandwidth?
In terms of bandwidth, I don't know.
Is it the 1 gigahertz? Is it 1.4? How much?
I think it's of the order of 1 or slightly less.
800 megahertz?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know exactly. We can look it up. But what is really amazing about these radios is the cost and the complexity. So for a complete link, both ends, with active beamforming, the total cost is $159. And then if you take the case to pieces, there are 3 large chips in there, and the antenna is printed. It's very, very, very cost effective. Wonderful technology.
Of course. So anyway, my point in all this is how much bandwidth do you have between those 2 radios? How much?
I think the total band that they can operate on is something like 58 to 64 gigs. I can look it up.
Gigabit?
Yeah, but you have to be careful because the bottom end of that band is in the O2 absorption band. That is chosen deliberately so that you can have very high speed but very short range radio links.
But you have tremendous amount of free bandwidth in the 27 and 28 as well, and there are a few other areas where they're gonna open
Okay.
up enough spectrum.
All right. No,
I just
I'm a great fan of radio, but there are limits to what you can do with it. Another limitation is that in most cases you actually have to have line of sight. You can't fire through a mountain, for example, without putting a relay on the top. Whereas,
absolutely, but
or you can't
still,
walk. You have difficulty working through a building or into a building, whereas with fiber you can get the signal into the building quite easily.
you're absolutely right. But you see, those are corner cases for wire, and again, wires are gonna continue to be used. But the advantages and the commodity of just dropping an equipment there instead of actually having to pass a wire. The truth is, most of the sites in this world are probably radio already because it's convenient, it's cheap. So I guess the question that this whole started was, is it true that a lot of them are going to be on the radio or all of them are on the radio? It's true that a lot of them are because there are tremendous advantages.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a mixture going forward. It's not going to be one or the other. It's going to be both.
Jay has a
Absolutely.
question. Jay has a 5G question. Let's hear.
So I appreciate all the engineering nuances of this, but it's my understanding that 5G is, I mean, I'm just a novice to this, but it seems like they're trying to create basically a mesh network, and to create a mesh network that has interoperability would require for all the carriers to be able to have compatible connectivity. James and Diana, do you think that's feasible? Or are they going to continue to run into proprietary roadblocks around their, siloed, quote, mesh networks?
Now, that's an interesting question, particularly for Diana, because Diana is very good at coming up with really clever, innovative, but slightly non-standard solutions. So what do you think, Diana?
You can have this one, James. You're welcome.
I think the answer lies in the standards. As long as everybody adheres to the back end standards and standard waveforms as well, as laid down by 3GPP, the standards body, then there's a fair chance that equipment from different vendors and different operators should be able to interwork. Does that answer your question?
I think it's an optimistic answer, let's put it that way, because the practicality of it is if I want Verizon's, quote, 5G, I'm going to have to kind of commit to Verizon's mesh network, and there's going to be restrictions on interoperability with all the other carriers, not to just pick on Verizon, but same thing's going to hold true with Sprint, AT&T, blah, blah, blah.
I think that there's a lot of risk in taking early 5G. Diana said this earlier. A lot of the stuff that's being sold in places like the US as 5G really isn't 5G, and it's definitely not standard.
You really have to look at color television and the history of color television in the United States, who had, I don't know, it's digital now, but back in the day, that was the absolute worst system in the world.
Yeah, and I think as time goes on, the standard will settle down, and the laws of economics dictate that everybody will end up gravitating towards the dominant standard.
And this is no different than what happened with 4G when we had Sprint hustled to roll out WiMAX and had it in, they basically had a good 18 to 24 month head start over the LTE networks because the WiMAX was being promulgated by a small collection of companies. They didn't have to go through an international standards process, which meant that they got out front. But along come all the other carriers and LTE and interoperability, save for frequency allocation. And then, of course, WiMAX, which started out as a fixed wireless service where they sold it to They put up a big tower in the center of the city, the test markets, and sold it to people for fixed wireless links. And then it became mobile phones, but it was only ever their mobile phones. And then LTE came along and ate their lunch. So the parallel is just so obvious to me. Unless you convince me otherwise.
And basically what you're saying, Michael, if I understand, is that the thing that killed WiMAX was Sprint's grip on the technology and the platform, and it wasn't interoperable and basically was doomed to failure.
No, Jay. What actually killed WiMAX is the fact that WiMAX is not a carrier-grade protocol. What actually carriers want from LTE is to be able to control and monitor the entire traffic, because this is what mobile carriers do. That's what they've been doing for 100 years, and that's what they do. LTE is made for the carriers. WiMAX was made for the internet service providers. Sprint had no fucking business to get into that mess. And they did, and they lost, and it cost them their company.
I love Doug Money's characterization of Sprint as being the island of misfit toys for technology, and that they try a little bit of everything. They're very experimental, but at the end of the day, they end up with sort of completely random bits of dissimilar technology across the company, and they've done this historically throughout their existence.
So, question for James. James, you're familiar with the some of the mesh networking initiatives that are coming out, such as I'm not going to say IPFS is a mesh networking, but one of their complementary protocols, libp2p, is. Do you see any viable alternatives that are emerging in the decentralized open source space that might eclipse this 5G initiative?
Do I see anything that's going to eclipse it?
Yes.
No, not really. The stuff that's going on in Wi-Fi, as Diana says, is not really carrier grade. Even though a number of people have tried to sell it as that. It's complementary. It has some strengths, but at the end of the day, 4G and 5G waveforms will completely spank 802.11. Think of put whatever letters you want after it. So what do you think, Diana? Is Wi-Fi a threat? I don't think so. I think it's complementary and can be used alongside the carrier grade 4G and 5G, but it's never going to replace it because they're different.
I don't think there is any relationship. I think that what's honestly, sorry for my camera, I think that what's going to happen is that the Wi-Fi is going to be more or less killed by the 5G.
Yeah, it falls into the same kind of category as the argument about which is going to be dominant, fiber or wireless, and the answer is neither, because they're both complementary. Anyway, can I just very gently change the direction a little bit here? Because Diana, something I've been really, really keen to find out about is what you're doing with your very clever software-defined radios. I understand that your team are offering the ability to run both 2G and 4G waveforms together on one single radio. Is that correct?
No.
Oh. All right.
It is technically possible, but it doesn't make any sense from the customer's perspective, so we don't do it.
Okay, well, I was just reading it off your website, that's all. So, yeah, SDR, LTE, and GSM in a single base station.
Oh, well. Happens.
Yeah, and I'm very focused on that kind of solution because when we started off building 4G networks here in the Chalk Valley, our plan was that we were only ever going to do, I'm getting echo back, it's a bit off-putting. We were only ever going to do 4G. We were not going to do 2G as well. but in the end, because of the difficulty involved in getting VoLTE roaming working with all the different operators, we actually ended up deploying a 2G overlay as well and running circuit switch fallback to 2G for voice.
That's because you missed to buy to grid. You should have bought to grid.
I should have done what?
You should have bought to grid. To grid is our VoLTE alternative technology that actually enables voice over LTE or Wi-Fi on any Android phone.
Well, tell me more. Sell it to me.
No,
What?
you see, in order for you to be a customer, you actually need to be in a situation to have like a telephony service. And I know that you guys are an MNO, but you're probably too small of an MNO for this.
Well, we're rapidly growing.
I'm really glad for you guys.
Yeah, we have our plans, world domination. And
so we did build a VoLTE alternative. Now, I'm not shitting you. We actually had a party during the MVNO Congress to present it. Yeah,
and so can you tell us the main headline advantages of your solution?
Well, yeah, it's enabled on any. The users can enable on any Android phone.
Okay, and in fact, that's a very good point. That's one of the most difficult things to sort out: how to provision a device for VoLTE. It's not easy to do if you're a micro operator. So
I know that very well.
Yeah. So is your solution? Are you actually using the native SIP client built into the phone, or
We're
are
not
you
using
running
SIP
an
at all.
application? So how are you doing the voice, the VoLTE piece?
So what we do is that, yes, we did build up an application. The application needs to be installed by the user. It's a very easy wizard-based kind of a thing. And on the core network side, it basically acts like a very standard core network equipment for voice. It's literally a replacement for VoLTE with a client running on the phone and the MSC running in the core, MSC like running on the core network.
Okay, can you do that? Can you do that in a power efficient mode without zapping the battery?
Yes. So it was a very difficult thing to do, but and what we had to do is that we did quite a lot of digging into Android. And when we built the app, we built it in a very Android-oriented way to not suck the battery. That's one of the biggest deals, that it doesn't waste the battery of the phone, because it's WebRTC based, but it's also done in such a way that is very, very friendly with the battery. That was like the biggest challenge we had. We wanted to do something that will literally act like VoLTE, and you use the normal dialer, it doesn't suck your battery, and it's like really easy for the operator to install.
Okay. Can you cope with iPhones or cheaper chip smartphones like this Nokia Chaos phone, just out of interest?
Like I said, Android only, and yes, it does work on Android Go.
Okay. Well, that possibly is a small disadvantage.
Well, if you can enable your VoLTE client on your iPhone, you can sell your VoLTE core.
Yeah, well, that's what we've been working on very hard, sorting out the provisioning of whatever device you put one of our SIM cards in. It's not easy.
I'm quite aware of that.
So if we crack that one and we have a workable solution, perhaps I can sell that to you.
Well, yeah, I'm still waiting to see that, because from what I heard from my customers, unless you have a significant amount of money, you're not going to get that VoLTE client provision for your network. For Apple.
Yeah. I'm very aware of the particular problem with Apple. And the current thought is that the way you get around that is you buy something like $50 million worth of iPhones in order to get a carrier profile, which is tricky. I know because we had to do that at TruePhone. It was hard work. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. I'm not supposed to admit to that. But the other part of the problem is how you deal with things like this little chap here, because there are an awful lot of them flying around the world at the moment.
That's an Android, right?
No, this is Kaios, K-A-I-O-S. It's a Nokia phone, very cheap.
Yeah,
Chinese
we only do
phone.
Android.
Yeah, well, the thing is, there are lots of these appearing all around the world.
We are
China,
not trying to solve. James, look.
China, India, Africa,
James,
all the places where they want low cost 4G.
Hey, James, listen. I'm not here to solve the entire universe. I'm here to make things better for most people, or for as many as we can. Now, what's really happening right now is that most operators, big and small, have a serious problem with Android because of the diversity in the ecosystem. And every phone vendor needs to enable the VoLTE client for every mobile operator. And that makes it impossible for small operators to actually enable VoLTE, because then most of their users will not be able to come with their Android phones into their network. What 2Grid does is that it basically breaks that problem. That's all. I'm not trying to solve iPhone. I'm not trying to solve Kaios. I'm trying to solve exactly one problem, because most of the operators in Africa have that problem. A lot of operators in smaller countries have that problem. A lot of small operators, MVNOs, have that problem. And a lot of their customers do not have money to buy iPhones.
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. No, I'm not saying that what you're doing is wrong. It's a slightly different approach, which is why I always love talking to you, Diana, because you do things differently to everybody else, and that is very healthy. You always make me think quite hard and question whether we're doing the right thing. So I always enjoy talking to you for that very reason.
I really think that what you guys are doing with the network, you're doing the right thing. But you know, you are in a very rich country where it's normal for you as an operator to have a problem with iPhone. However, there are many countries in this world where they do not have a first world country problem.
Yeah, well, we think we may have a solution to the universal problem. And it's all to do with the solution lies with the SIM, or the SIMs plural, because we deploy not one SIM, but multiple SIMs, but you know all about that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And supporting SIM apps. There's a lot of complexity goes on with SIMs, and people are not aware of what complicated little devices they are and how powerful they can be. And we think that they're one of the big missing pieces that people who want to run these small mobile networks find very difficult to get their hands on. So we're on a mission to make them available to other people. Anyway, I was very interested in your mixed 2G, 4G radio, but you say you don't want to talk about that, so that's a shame. Because I would be interested in buying something that can do that.
Well,
at the moment, we're running two different radio overlays: a 4G one on band 40, and a 2G one on band 3. And it's too complicated. I just want one radio that does 2G and 4G.
So if you do have a solution with the SIMs, why do you need to run the 2G network anymore?
Sorry?
if you do have a solution with the SIMs to activate VoLTE, why do you need to run the 2G network anymore?
The problem is not with our end; it's with how you run the VoLTE roaming for other operators, and there are issues getting the VoLTE roaming working with third-party operators. We're okay with our own SIMs on our own network, but to have other people then roam and run VoLTE across our network is a little bit trickier.
So still, why?
We'll crack it, but in the short to medium term, the solution is to do exactly what all the big mobile network operators did, which is for voice, do circuit switch fallback onto 2G. It's not a particularly pretty solution, and I'm not proud of it, but it works. And when we had a government minister here to open the network, failure was not an option. It had to work, and so we did 2G fallback. And the phone call went through to Westminster, and he gave us a big thumbs up. So mission successful.
Yay! As long as it makes money, it's great. So here's my problem. My battery is gonna die probably in about 10 minutes. I just wanna be very upfront about that. So a few things that I would like to mention about the whole VoLTE thing. I think that VoLTE as a technology, it's a bad technology. I think it was designed before we actually had the smartphones. And I think as a technology, it actually works against the nature of the smartphones. And because of that, even if we do get it enabled and so on, I honestly think we should replace it either way.
Yeah,
because
I think there's an element of truth in that. It is overcomplicated, isn't it?
It's not about being overcomplicated. It's about the fact that this SIP as a protocol started from the idea that the clients are smart, while the smartphones are actually not smart. They're depending usually on the cloud service, because otherwise you end up with a dead battery. So it's just a mismatch.
What are these technologies, all of them, based on, though? Aren't they driven by how much money the carriers can make and maybe manufacturers? Because if you look at, for example, Wi-Fi calling, which is so very non-standard, you don't have it on every device. I have really good Wi-Fi here. Why can't I call while my operator doesn't do it? At least it doesn't do it on these phones, or maybe it does it on iPhones. I don't know. But
because it's the same.
Go ahead.
Because voice over Wi-Fi, it's actually a variation of voice over LTE, and that's exactly the issue. The phone himself is not enabled for VoLTE because the phone manufacturer needs to enable VoLTE or voice over Wi-Fi for every network. So they actually need to have a contract, and there's going to be a contract if the mobile operator is buying enough phones. So what that does is that for phones that are not very popular and stuff like that, or for networks that are not very popular, you will end up with no support. Another thing with 2Grid is that, for example, it does work over Wi-Fi, and it can even keep your call up and running. It can do a handover between data and the Wi-Fi. It works on 3G data as well. But yes, voice over Wi-Fi, this is why it's not the problem with the carrier, it's a problem with the phone. And even
a lot of times, no, I'm just going to say that when I've inquired about it occasionally, I haven't for a long time. See, my signal is really bad here, by the way, in my office. So it would be good. It would be handy to be able to make phone calls with better quality on Wi-Fi, which is excellent. But the point is, so it's not a money-saving thing in my case, but the point is that whenever I've looked into it, the carriers have databases, and I have read on multiple forums on the internet, which we all know is very true. Everything you see on the internet is right. But the point is that a lot of people have said that it's just a flag on the database of the carrier a lot of times, because the phones advertise. I have a OnePlus phone. Pretty sure that one of my models does this. but it just doesn't do it on all carriers, and all carriers don't do it on OnePlus or whatever. So, James, you probably have some input on this too.
That's,
The point
that's
is,
not the issue.
yeah, go ahead.
The issue is that the phone does not enable your network.
Yeah.
It's never the carrier that is not enabling the phone. It's always the phone that is not enabling the carrier.
Okay, so that part may be wrong. Somebody on the internet was wrong then when they said that. But the point is that there are things that the carrier apparently does enable or do. By the way, my current carrier has, or maybe it was Orange, I don't know, one of my carriers that I used in the past did have their own app to be able to make Wi-Fi calling. After all, isn't that an advantage for them not using the tower? Maybe it isn't. I don't know. What do you guys think?
It's exactly what we are doing with 2Grid, and we allow you to, in the same way, to make phone calls. It's from your perspective, it's an app, but when you made phone calls, Randy, did you make them by starting them from the dialer and from the contacts, or did you make them from the app?
Well, the app, I didn't get a chance to finish. The app has been discontinued for a long time now. They don't offer it anymore. But the whole point was, and this is my particular problem, I don't worry about it because I don't use the phone that much, but my single problem here is that any of our phones, and it's true, we live in a multi-level house, and on the top floors, the phone signal's okay, but here on the bottom and just outside the house in the street, the signal's poor. And I've been in many streets where that's the case. The point would be that if I could do Wi-Fi calling, the quality would probably be better. So they had an app. They don't do that anymore. They also had a box that did this, and they don't have that you could rent.
Yeah.
And they don't do that anymore either.
You're absolutely right, Randy. And what Diana said just before is totally correct as well. And that is that the operators have to configure, they have to provision the handset to do Wi-Fi calling if you're going to do it natively on the handset. For that reason, most of the operators only support the most popular handsets for Wi-Fi calling. Right. So you get iPhones, you get the top of the range Samsungs,
couple of Samsungs, yeah,
and Sony perhaps,
yeah,
but probably not a lot more than that. So if you've got a OnePlus or any of the other Chinese popular second-tier Android handsets, which are really very good, even though they are capable of doing Wi-Fi calling, because the operator is not bothered to configure them, you won't get it.
And by the way, the OnePlus 7, if you look up the reviews on it, it's considered to be one of the best phones around. Anyway, we got to keep Diana on so that her battery doesn't die. In other words, we have to let her go. But Diana,
yeah,
I don't want to let Diana go. It's just so brilliant to see you, Diana.
I know. We need to have her on more often.
That comes directly from my heart. We need to see more of you.
I agree. So we agree on one thing.
Take care of guys. I really need to check out.
I know. So we'll be talking soon. Okay, Diana, thanks for coming in with us.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Goodbye.
And there she was going.
And there she's going.
But I thought Diana was pretty good. We had no punch-ups. Only one F word. So that's okay.
What I am absolutely amazed by, though, was the quality. Yeah, there was a lot of noise, Jay, because she was in a Starbucks, and yeah, there was a whole lot of noise. By the way, it's amazing that somebody didn't come up and say, "Would you please shut up?" Because I don't know, and if I was sitting here having coffee, I wouldn't want anybody chattering away. Maybe she was in a corner a little bit. But the point is this, wow, the signal and the image. I didn't ask what phone she has. Probably Android, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, that was pretty amazing. I mean, her quality was pretty much like yours, James.
And she was doing that on 4G roaming
to Romania with the backhaul.
Yeah, so, well, it depends on how the Romanians are doing choosing to run their data. They might be doing local breakouts because it's cheaper.
All right, that would make sense.
And on LTE, the operator, the home network, has the option of either setting up the data session so it home routes back to a packet data network gateway back in Romania, or you can do it the slightly cheaper way, which is you just say just dump it on the internet locally.
But that would be too much of an advantage for the consumer. So why would you do that to make him happy? You know, the
Yeah, why would
AT&T's
you do that? Well, if you're a Romanian operator, it's cheaper.
because, you know,
That's a really good answer to that one.
yeah.
And you get lower latency as well. The drawback,
Latency. Are we on that again?
yeah, the drawback is that you're not in the data path. So if you want to do deep packet inspection
Oh, yeah.
and lawful or illegal monitoring of the data stream, then you can't because it's being dropped on the internet locally. So
I would just like to express my condolences to those of you in the UK who, when you're in Europe, don't have free local calls. I can't believe that that's true. I'm shocked.
well, France is the exception to the rule. You don't know how lucky you are, and
I
it's
had no
only
idea.
because
Of
you've got
free.
Iliad and Free,
Yeah.
who completely bounce the market. I mean, if you go
Interesting.
to other places like the US, for example, you get
Well,
well and truly skipped.
the U.S. doesn't count. They are a complete exception. They are the American exception, as you know.
But anywhere else in Europe, the
Are you
standard deal
sure?
is yes, I am sure.
That's incredible.
It's what we get in UK, which is when you go abroad, you get exactly the same costs as you would when you're in your home country.
Yeah, but wait a minute, James. This is what I don't understand, because I can call Germany right now on my cell, and it's unlimited, the same monthly fee. Well,
Yes,
unlimited.
but
You know, we all
you're
understand
but you're
unlimited,
in
right?
France on a French plan.
Oh, I see.
And we poor Brits over here, or Germans, or anybody else. And if there's anybody in ZipDX
What
who
about your
can
okay? What about your fixed line, James? Your fixed lines call Europe for the same rates or not?
well, nobody uses BT fixed line over here because it's far too expensive.
All right, anybody's fixed. Your fixed line at home, whatever you've got. Can you call France for
Oh
the same?
yeah, everywhere's.
But it's not surtaxed. It's the same as if you were calling England. No.
Yeah, the way I do it is I top up an account with €10, and then I have 90
Not
days
an
worth
answer
of.
to the question, though. The question is, all right, so we have our plan here, this, you know, triple play, whatever. And this is true of every operator in France. You have immediately on your fixed line, now I'm talking, your fixed line has something like 110 countries you can call that do not charge anything further to your monthly.
But you have to pay a monthly recurring fee for that, don't you?
Yeah, but that monthly recurring fee might be 30 euros or something. Now that,
Yeah,
you know,
it's a huge amount.
I'm talking about fixed now, James, with internet included. Internet, fiber, we have everything included. It's about 50 something. But that's
interesting enough. We're
with
running,
cable and everything, though.
Or the Chalk Mobile is running a BT replacement product where you get an LTE modem device with Wi-Fi, multiple RJ45s for data, and either one or two RJ11s for your fixed line replacement service. And we determined it is cheaper for us to give unlimited international calling than it is to try and bill for the calls. So you get unlimited international calls subject to an acceptable use policy,
of course,
and only to the major countries. So anything at wholesale that costs less than a penny.
I am incredulous. So we're lucky to live in France, I guess.
Yeah, you are.
It's funny. I did not know that. I thought this was Europe-wide.
But the most expensive piece in the equation today is actually the rating and billing engine. So so what we've done here is we just engineered it out. Just say you've got unlimited calls subject to an acceptable use policy.
All right.
And you might get one or two that kicks the arse out of it, but 99% will be good as gold, and you make quite a lot of money out of it.
Okay, long story short, because we're on the hour here. All right, so in Europe, to pretty much general, there may be exceptions like Switzerland, which isn't a part of Europe anyway, or Andorra. But in general, in the European countries, you go abroad, you're Italian, you're in the UK, or you're in France, you can call Italy in your plan without surcharges, but any other calls, you're roaming, right?
Correct. Yeah, you make calls to your home country.
Can't believe
so
it.
The rule is you get the same deal that you get at home, and if at home it costs you extra money to make an international call, then you will pay exactly the same, even though you're in France and you want to call a French number.
Well, it's better than before.
It's still.
Well, it's better than before. It's better than when you were in a foreign country and everything was roaming, right?
Indeed. Well, the only bit that people are really focused on these days is the data component. Because who makes voice calls anyway?
That's 100% true. And with Wi-Fi, you use Google Voice or whatever. The only reason I'm paying 15 instead of 10 euros is because when I go to the States, I have a package that allows me to call France to make calls in the States while I'm in the States for free, within the plan. Otherwise, I could have used at the time I got Google Fi and used that. But when I got back over here, I wasn't going to pay 20 a month to make calls in my home country. Anyway.
Yeah. Just a little throwaway line. All the extensions we have here in the house have all got US numbers. And the reason for that is that calling US numbers is just free, always free.
Oh, there's so many ways to do it. I'm going to shut this off. We can continue, although you said you had to go. But
I have to go and have dinner.
1 second while we do this one last thing. And we are out, ladies and gentlemen.
I hope that was